Right, tonight, Chief Justice Martha Koome officially took office after receiving the instruments of power, cementing her place at the helm of Kenya's judiciary with a strong message on the need to respect the rule of law. Ironically, however, just a few kilometers away, the head of the executive, President Uhuru Kenyatta, was engaging in what has been largely termed as an illegality. President Kenyatta today reopened the Kenya Meat Commission after it was transferred to the Kenya Defence Forces, a move that had been blocked by the High Court in February. Tonight, the blatant disregard of court orders by the executive is just one of the myriad of challenges the new Chief Justice stares at as she takes over. What must Kenya's 15th Chief Justice do to succeed? I am now joined by Senior Counsel Professor Tom Ojenda, who now joins us live from Kisumu, and lawyer CJ Martha joining us here in studio to just take a look at one, the Chief Justice in tray, and two, what are some of the challenges she's set to encounter and how will she navigate them? Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and, of course, to be part of this conversation. Text us on 22155, Twitters at Akisa Wandera at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is KTN Prime. And perhaps let me start with you, Prof, because you're far. Looking at that commissioning of the Kenya Meat Commission, a lot has been said about that particular action by the President after the High Court orders. Your thoughts on that?
Akisa, thank you very much. I have noted that today, His Excellency the President opened for operation the Kenya Meat Commission, the new Kenya Meat Commission, after, of course, many years of non-performance. And I think that the reopening is a step in the right direction. Justice Mrima's orders gave a period of 3 months for compliance on the question of the transfer from the Ministry of Defense back to the Ministry of Agriculture. And I believe that there will be consultations for the court order to be complied with. That's number one. But number two, I believe that any party that is aggrieved then would take steps to appeal. If the state is aggrieved, perhaps the 3 months is enough time to appeal the decision of the judge. But I believe that in terms of compliance, there would be need to be steps within those 3 months to comply with the order. So I think on the face of it, you may say that there's non-compliance, but it is the court that sanctioned time for compliance.
But this would not be the first time, Professor Ojenda, that the executive is seen largely to not comply with court orders. It has been perennial.
I have no doubt, Akisa, that yes, there are several court orders, including especially the one on the swearing in of the judges. I think that is, for me, the most flagrant, because it is an order made by the judiciary, directed at the executive, for the good of the public. And I believe that with the swearing in and taking office of Chief Justice Martha Koome, that I believe that there will be compliance, and I believe that the President will swear in the 41 judges. It is just to ensure that work moves at the front of the judiciary for the benefit of the people of this country.
In fact, I imagine that the 3 months that was given by the court for compliance elapsed sometime this month, up for confirmation. CJ Martha, looking at the President's actions of late, a new Chief Justice coming in and calling for the respect of rule of law, is she likely to encounter trouble on this front?
Well, personally, when the discussion of disobedience of court order, which has been taking place for some time, the issue of the best example, as my friend Professor Ojenda has given, is the one of the appointment of the 41 judges. But an equally more important one is the one of the advocate Miguna Miguna. Mm-hmm. Because in the case of Miguna Miguna, there were quite a number of court orders that were given, but more and above the issue of court orders, in the issue of Miguna Miguna, is the fact that the idea that the executive arm of government can strip a citizen of Kenya or effectively of his protection of law as a citizen of Kenya, and including to cap it with disobedience of the court order. Perhaps for me that is as low as it can get. However, one may disagree with the politics and the usual commentary of Mr. Miguna. Therefore, as the new Chief Justice takes office, I think it is not easy for any lawyer to envy her. These are very difficult times for two reasons. Number one, on the very day that she's taking office, she will obviously have to confront with the fact that there's a huge and momentous case of the BBI appeals that would probably work its way up to the Supreme Court. Yeah. There is also the issue that if we don't get BBI right and the issues of the political transition, then I can foresee great trouble ahead with regard to the Kenyatta succession. So one cannot envy Justice Koome. One can only wish her the very best. She will need all her skills and everybody's goodwill. At least she's starting on a good note. I saw the president wished her well. Yes. The speakers have wished her well. Lawyers have wished her well. And I believe many citizens of Kenya are wishing her well. What does she do with this political capital? Yeah. It remains to be seen.
What are the skills that perhaps you think she needs to have to navigate this?
In my view, I think most of the skills, you either have it or you don't have it. Yeah. At least she's been a leader. She's an approachable person. And I believe she should be able, as she was able to convince the JSC, that she would be able to ensure that the business of the judiciary is conducted, the judiciary regains its place in the constitutional framework as it exists in the 2010 Constitution. But more importantly, her most important skills would, of course, be, she's only one of the Superior Court judges. I think they could almost be about 100 now, from the High Court to the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. All those are very important individuals in their own right, and they can make decisions without being directed by her. So how will she be able to marshal her colleagues to ensure that the Constitution is protected and the rule of law? And of course, to ensure at the same time that there is institutional harmony and interdependence that ensure that at the end of the day, the business of government and the Kenyan state can actually be able to proceed in a smooth manner. But in this, it is not just, the challenge is only not just for her, because the more we are having a dysfunctional state, you cannot entirely say that it is a function of the judiciary alone.
Okay, all right. Professor Ojenda, Willie Mutunga avoided open confrontations with the executive especially, but his successor, David Maraga, did the exact opposite. He openly aired his frustrations with the executive, with parliament, you name it. Looking at these challenges, blatant disregard of court orders, we are talking about budgetary allocations that she's already talked about, and just the general frosty relations between the judiciary and the executive. Which approach, coming from the history of her predecessors, which approach should she take?
Akisa, thank you. I think that, and this I say because I served in the JSC in the time of Willie Mutunga as Chief Justice, and also in the time, partly in the time of David Maraga after 2016. The two men had different approaches to governance. Chief Justice Emeritus Willie Mutunga adopted a softer approach, and this soft approach would see him engage, visit State House sparingly, and whenever he had a question that touched on the interdependence of the other arms of government, he would consult the JSC, I recall very well as president, and he was always slow to make decisions. He was a very interesting manager, I must say, and his approach, I think, worked well for the respect of the institution. You know, the three arms of government much as they must work in tandem, must respect each other. But of course, that comes with the person in office in each of those stations. Now, Willie Mutunga, as I recall, got to a point where he brought the level of respect for the judiciary to almost the same level as the executive and the legislature. And I think that must be commended. There was no confrontation. He had occasion to consult. I think for Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga, things came to a head when he realized that he did not have sufficient allocation to run the judiciary. And I think the blatant disrespect or violation of court orders, I think upset Chief Justice Emeritus Maraga, and that is why his approach was a bit more direct. But incidentally, after his appointment, Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga seemed like a Chief Justice who would pretty much work well with the executive. But I don't know what happened. At some point, things got fairly frosty. And when I saw him issue a statement on his own, then I knew that, it was no longer business as usual. But I think I would advise the current Chief Justice, Martha Koome, that an engagement with the executive should nurture respect for the three institutions, should ensure compliance with the law, and should be guided by the Constitution, which defines the roles of the executive, His Excellency the President, defines the role of the legislature and the role of the judiciary. As long as the judiciary is resourced, is given a sufficient budget, and is allowed the freedom or the space to work, Chief Justice Martha Koome will deliver to the people of Kenya.
Do you think this issue of do you believe this issue of the budget is what continues to strain the relationship between these two institutions, or there's more to that?
I think the budget is key, because the budget, if you do not resource an institution, then you create a basis for the Chief Justice to come begging for favors. You create an opportunity for the Chief Justice to come to ask for favors so that the judges can be comfortable. And I think that dependence compromises independence of the institution. If the law defines what is due to an arm of government, for instance in terms of budget, if say it is 2.5% as it is optimally obtaining in other country jurisdictions in the Commonwealth, if you say the judiciary budget is say 2.5, and then you action or you ensure that the judiciary fund is operationalized, then any unspent money is sent to that account. I can tell you that the judiciary will not need the executive. It will work independently. It will ensure that the judges and magistrates are paid well. It will ensure that courts are able to be operationalized, even in the areas that are inaccessible. And I can assure you that you will have a more robust and independent judiciary. You will have judges who are independent, and you will have an independent Chief Justice, because you will not need the executive for anything. There will be enough money to run the judiciary, to build courts, and to ensure that justice everywhere. The rule of law, the judiciary will enforce a number of its orders through arms of government. But I'll tell you, as long as the judiciary is under-resourced, it will continue to seek favors from the executive. And the question of independence or otherwise will always be in question.
Mungai, looking at what we're saying here, it would appear the Chief Justice has a very tight rope she'll be working on and a very tight balancing act. On one hand, trying to engage with the executive and the other arm of government, that's the legislature, in ensuring that the judiciary is well funded. And on the other hand, jealously guarding the independence of the judiciary. How will she work around this?
I think at least on the issue of funding the judiciary, to me, I would see it more as a responsibility of the Kenyan state. So that here I mean that Parliament and the executive that play a more prominent role in the allocation of resources, it is in their interest to ensure that the judiciary is well financed and can be able to run its operations. Because I always say that for purposes of law and order, it is impossible to be able to carry out that function, which is largely a function of the executive, without the courts that are capable of going ahead with their businesses. If it is the issue of the ease of doing business, if it's the issue of ensuring that investments are protected, all these for the executive to realize its mandate and for Kenya as a whole to be able to continue being a free society, a society in which capitalism can thrive and the market system can work, you need independent courts. And if these are not going to be there, so that these are goals of the entire society.
Right.
It should not be seen to be just a goal of the Chief Justice. And that is why I would say, even from the very many clients that we represent, they all want the court system to work. Many wananchi, we have a serious problem of extrajudicial execution. You need courts all over to ensure that there is justice, the Bill of Rights is robust, and everybody can be able to enjoy their rights and freedoms. Therefore, whatever else that Justice Koome would require to do through interpersonal relationships and through ensuring that the voice is heard for the upteenth time, that let the courts work and let them be facilitated.
Right.
I think she would just be saying something that all of us would want to be done.
Another big issue coming up, taking us back to 2017 rather, the issue of revisiting. We have a big case set to come back to Court of Appeal, likely to the Supreme Court. That's in the BBI case that has all the possible political interests in this country. Coming at a time when the judiciary is under new leadership, from the Chief Justice to the head of the Court of Appeal, Professor Ojenda, how is this expected to pan out in court?
Thanks, Akisa. Let me say that, let me take this opportunity to congratulate Justice Musinga on his election as President of the Court of Appeal. He was elected today, and that opens a new phase in the administration of justice in the Court of Appeal. You know, the Court of Appeal is one of those efficient levels of court. They are very efficient. Under Justice Ouko, now judge of the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal has performed extremely well in terms of clearing case backlogs, in terms of delivery. And I think that is in the mouth of every advocate. Now, what the challenge that Justice Musinga has is that a lot of certificates and applications have been pending in the Court of Appeal for a while now. You know, without a substantive president, since Judge Ouko took leave to seek a position in the Supreme Court, a lot of 5-2B applications have been pending, including the BBI applications that have recently been filed. So his task will be to empanel judges to hear some of these matters. I think today Raila Odinga Baba filed another application under the rubric of 5-2B. And I must say this, that this is a delicate time, because if the Court of Appeal, for instance, grants a stay after the parties meet the three limbs that are required to grant a stay, nugatory, extreme urgency, public importance, if they meet all those requirements with an arguable appeal, of course, then the referendum process, christened as reggae, will continue. If the court declines to grant the stay, then even IBC will be incapable of proceeding with its work, including undertaking the referendum that is in the mouth or in the lip of every proponent of BBI. So we have those real challenges, and I agree with you, Akisa, that this is a delicate time, and the judges who will be selected or who will be empaneled to hear all these cases have a task at hand. Whatever decision they make.
What does that mean for
whatever decision
for the one who heads this particular judiciary during this very delicate time? What does it mean for Martha Koome?
For the Chief Justice, gladly, she does not empanel the judges at the Court of Appeal, but this is a matter that would as well end up in the Supreme Court and that she would have to preside over. I'm sure either way, whichever way this goes in the Court of Appeal, this is litigation that will end up in the Supreme Court. And I'm sure the Supreme Court is waiting to settle this political question at a very crucial political moment. Because remember, this impacts on the future of this country. Whichever way this goes will impact on how the election is conducted and the outcome of that election. It impacts on the political class and on the people of Kenya ultimately.
Kibe Mungai, you're involved in this case. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts around the BBI case, how monumental it will be coming at a time when the judiciary is getting new leadership, Chief Justice, Court of Appeal, President. How is this in any way expected to affect these judges and Martha Koome at the helm?
At least let me start with the clarification that there is no case that I represented in the High Court, but at least pursuant to my civic duty as a person who practices constitutional law,
yes,
I've been engaged in making commentaries on this case.
Are you involved in any of the appeals?
No.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Having said that, therefore, I wish to say that although at the initial stage, that is the stage at the Court of Appeal, there is little that the new Chief Justice can be able to do in terms of which way the decision of the Court of Appeal is going to go. There is whatever decision that is made, if the stay is granted, for example, it would be in many ways, and looking at it purely as a question of law, it would be a controversial kind of stay. Remembering that the main order that was given by the High Court is actually a negative order, a permanent injunction against IEBC from conducting the referendum, and of course another order of declaration saying that the BBI process is null and void. And therefore, these categories of orders ordinarily are dealt with by either setting aside or affirming them. Now, the choice of a stay, the application for stay, is going to be that if it is granted from a purely technical point of view, it is going to be somehow controversial, and more importantly, without hearing the appeal, if BBI Reg, as Professor Ojenda says, were to continue based on such an order of stay, then for practical purposes, the application for stay would have resolved the appeal itself. And therefore, this is why now I'm saying these big decisions, if they are made on account of an application, then it is definitely going, those who are talking about judicialization of politics or politicization of the judiciary, those arguments will even be more rife because you cannot win either way. And therefore, personally, I was of the view that faced with this kind of situation, probably if a strategy had been taken like, let's hear this appeal, let's have a judgment substantively deciding whether the 5 judges were right or wrong, so that you do not start on a note that is highly politicized, particularly for the new Chief Justice. But again, this is for the very eminent lawyers who have been appointed by the various parties to argue that case.
Final question for Martha Koome. What should be her major focus in her tenure, Kibe?
For me, I think Martha Koome, somebody doesn't have to come up with what is new. If you are ahead of the judiciary, it is really to rise to the challenge at the time when you will be at the helm of, in that position. There are three that I see. Number one, there is the issue of the BBI, that given the previous experiences in the past elections, there is a lot of political contestations that appear not to have been fully resolved by the 2010 constitution. Now, this process is being undertaken through legal reforms, but these legal reforms have found themselves disputed in the courts of law. How that ends would be a critical issue during her tenure. Number two is the issue that whether it is next year or some time after that, there is definitely going to be a lot about the Kenyatta succession and the cases that comes around it, both in terms of petitions and other arguments. And now that you have the Hustler Nation, that has brought a new dynamic into the issue. And thirdly, there is a question that remains unaddressed that to me is very important. And this is the fact that whereas we have a very good constitution, the Bill of Rights is yet to be as efficacious, as protective, as I believe the framers of the constitution wanted. In this country, and I say that with a lot of respect, I think there is a sense in which you do not feel that the lives of ordinary poor people at the hands of the police are respected enough. So that there's a sense in which the death of some men is very cheap in this country, and the Constitution must do something about it.
Okay. Professor, I'll give you a minute to end it with that. Looking at the tenure that starts today for Martha Koome, what do you expect she will majorly focus in, or what do you hope she'll majorly focus in that will form a highlight of her legacy at the top?
Thanks, Akisa. I think Martha Koome, Chief Justice, starts with an advantage. There are two frameworks, the Willy Mutunga Judicial Transformation Framework and the David Maraga Sustaining Judiciary Transformation Framework, two important frameworks that will guide her tenure. She comes at a time when a pandemic has been on its way and when largely IT has been harnessed in the judiciary and has increased efficiency. I think she just needs to build on that to ensure that the judiciary delivers, and that delivery will include ensuring that she's able to have the 41 judges sworn in, but to live to her true self. Remember, Chief Justice Martha Koome was in the civil society before. She was the chair of FIDA, Kenya, and I believe that we should see some of those rule of law questions come back. She needs to stand for the rule of law and for the respect of the judiciary. I hope that she'll be able to also deal with the problematic of the frosty relations that we've had between the judiciary, parliament, and the executive, so that she's able to restore the honor to the judiciary as an equal arm of government. I think for me that is the biggest challenge. But of course, lastly, she needs to navigate the difficult political environment that we have in this country, the succession. Now, that will be a tough one. We can only wait and see.
Yes, definitely. Matter of wait and see, I agree with you. Coming in at a very delicate time, a highly politicized moment. We will be keeping an eye on how Chief Justice Martha Koome will navigate this. My guest tonight, Professor Tom Agenda, joining us live from our Kisumu studios. Thank you, Prof, for coming in as a senior counsel. And Kibe Mungai, lawyer, joining us here in studio. Thank you, Mr. Mungai, for joining us here on KTN Prime. I'll be seeing you tomorrow night on the front row. I am Akisa Wandera. Sign language interpreter is Meresha Witi. Robinson Okenya comes in next to the FKF PL review show. Stay tuned.